"You're not allowed to speak in board meetings unless spoken to," she said, smiling with the exact cruelty reserved for people who believe they'll never be challenged. The CEO's voice echoed across the glass room like a sentence handed down in court. Maya swallowed hard, feeling every eye in the room on her. She was the only black woman on the floor. Not just the only one in that meeting, but the only one employed above janitorial level in that entire tower. It wasn't the first time she had been silenced, but it was the first time she had spoken anyway. The numbers didn't lie. The data showed their flagship project was bleeding resources, ignoring key markets, and hiding compliance failures under glossy decks. She had brought proof. She had tried to warn them. And now the room watched as the CEO, Cassandra DeWitt, cut her off, smirked, and moved on. 15 seconds. That's all it took to remind Maya who mattered. The meeting ended. Nobody looked at her. Maya gathered her folder in silence. As she stepped into the elevator, she exhaled, alone, until the CEO stepped in behind her. The doors slid shut. A jolt, then darkness, then nothing. They were stuck. The emergency light flickered on like an accusation. "You've got to be kidding me," Cassandra muttered, stabbing at the call button. Maya didn't speak. She stood in the far corner, gripping her folder. The CEO turned slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim red hue. "You," she said. "Of course." Maya lifted her chin. "Me." A beat of silence stretched between them. Cassandra paced once, then twice. "This'll be quick. Building's old, but the systems work." "I'm sure someone's monitoring it." Maya said nothing. "You're not going to use this to lecture me about diversity again, are you?" Cassandra added with a scoff, arms crossed. "I was never lecturing," Maya said quietly. "I was reporting risk, fraud. You just didn't like the source." The CEO's laugh was sharp, brittle. "You think you know how this company runs?" "I know enough," Maya replied. Her voice didn't waver. The silence returned, heavier this time. Outside, the building breathed on. But inside that little box, two women stood, one dressed in a $5,000 suit, the other in a faded cotton blouse. One who controlled careers with a word. One who was one warning away from termination. And yet, in that moment, they were equals. "If you're going to fire me," Maya said after a long silence, "you might as well hear the rest of what I know." Cassandra's face barely moved. "This is extortion." "It's the truth," Maya said. "And you should listen before the building starts moving again." Maya stepped forward, just a little. Her hands still held the folder. "This company is about to be exposed for systemic wage theft through contractor misclassification. The board doesn't know. Legal's been paid to look the other way. And your name's on the approval documents from 2020. Cassandra didn't move. HR is using AI to screen out non-ideal candidates, which just so happens to mean anyone who isn't white or upper middle class. You signed that policy." Still silence. "The community program you use in press interviews, it's a shell. The funding never arrives. But the PR budget? Up 300%. Cassandra finally spoke. "Why are you saying this to me?" "Because I told compliance. They buried it. I told my manager." He laughed. "You told me not to speak." Cassandra exhaled. "You don't know how many enemies I had to beat to get here." "Maybe that's the problem," Maya replied. The words hung between them like a wire pulled too tight. "You think this place is built on fairness?" Cassandra snapped. "It's built on who survives." "That's it. You want justice? Start a nonprofit? You want change? Win first." Maya's eyes were steady. "No, I want accountability. I want to be able to walk into a room and not be told my voice is a liability." A buzz crackled over the elevator intercom. Then silence again. No one was coming quickly. "You could lose everything," Cassandra said suddenly. Her tone had shifted. It wasn't mocking anymore. It was warning. I already have, Maya said. But you? You still have a choice. There was a long pause. Maya opened the folder. Inside were screenshots, audits, signed internal memos, time-stamped emails. Her own HR complaint, closed without resolution. Cassandra's eyes scanned the pages. She said nothing. I'm not here to ruin you, Maya said. I'm here because I believe no one else will do this. I've worked here 5 years. I know where the rot is. I want to fix it. You think you can change an institution like this? I think we have to try, or we burn with it. A deep silence fell again, the kind that holds weight. Cassandra finally looked up, and for the first time, her face cracked. You kept all of this? Everything. And if I say no? Then when the elevator moves again, Maya said, voice even, I walk out and press send. External media. Whistleblower protection. A full digital record. Cassandra looked away. A silence of power faltering was unmistakable. Maya didn't blink. You think I'm the villain, Cassandra said quietly. I think you're the gatekeeper. And it's time someone held the door open. Outside, the elevator clicked. Power surged. A mechanical groan filled the box. The lights stabilized. The floor display flickered back to life. They were moving again. Slowly, steadily. Floor 9. Floor 10. Maya looked at Cassandra. I'll be waiting for your answer. The doors opened. Cassandra stepped out first. She didn't look back. Maya walked out behind her. But the silence between them wasn't just awkward, no. It was charged. A battle had begun. Not with screaming. Not with protests. But with truth, intelligence, and the audacity of someone no one thought mattered. Someone who refused to stay silent anymore. The next morning, Maya arrived at work earlier than usual. She moved quietly through the rows of cubicles. The lights still dim. The air still filled with the sterile hum of servers and recycled air. No one looked up. No one ever did. But something had shifted. The weight in her chest wasn't fear. Not anymore. It was purpose. She sat at her desk, opened her encrypted drive, and began assembling the documents. Emails, reports, audio recordings from meetings, Redland contracts, photos of documents signed with initials she knew weren't hers. Each item had a story. Each one a moment where someone more powerful had assumed she wouldn't notice, that she wouldn't understand, that she'd be too scared to push back. They weren't just underestimating her. They were underestimating every assistant, every intern, every custodian and coordinator and contractor forced to sit quietly while the structure above them rotted with hypocrisy. By noon, her inbox pinged. An internal message. From Cassandra. Subject: Private meeting, 6 p.m., executive level, no explanation. No CCS. Just the two of them. The executive floor was silent at night. Too silent. Most people weren't allowed up there after 5. But Maya had her badge clearance updated quietly that afternoon. She stepped off the elevator and walked past the glass walls and leather chairs, the massive desk with the city view beyond it. The lights of the skyline glittered, like the city was pretending to sleep. Cassandra stood at the window, arms folded, a half-empty glass in her hand. You brought the rest? She asked without turning. I brought enough, Maya said. Cassandra turned slowly, gesturing toward a small table by the window. A second glass was already poured. Sit. Maya didn't move. I'm not here to drink. Cassandra nodded, took a long sip, and sat down herself. Here's what I'm offering, she said, voice low. You become part of the Internal Ethics Board. We restructure it. Real independence. Your terms. You bring your evidence internally. We make changes. Quietly. Maya raised an eyebrow. You think this is just about damage control? I think you're smart enough to know how things really work. Maya opened her folder and pulled out one page. It was a list of 25 employees, all women of color, all let go in the past year. I want every one of them reviewed, publicly. That would be a PR disaster. Exactly, Maya said. It'll show that this company is finally telling the truth. Cassandra leaned back in her chair. Do you have any idea how many enemies that will make you? I already have them. The difference is now they know I'm watching too. The CEO sighed, her eyes on the city. You want to burn the whole thing down, don't you? No, Maya said. I want to rebuild it, but I won't do it quietly. Not anymore. A long pause. Cassandra closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again. There's more, she said. I know. There's a second set of books. Legacy accounts, shell vendors, executive bonuses hidden as day grants. I know that too. The CEO stood. You've been collecting everything. Maya nodded. Because the system taught me to. That if I didn't protect myself, no one would. Silence again, but something deeper now. Not antagonism, not exactly. Something closer to reckoning. Cassandra finally sat down. You want a press conference? I want full audit access. Internal, external. I want employee panels. Public reporting. You go on record admitting the policies were discriminatory and deceptive. Then you step down. Cassandra looked at her like someone just waking up after years of noise. Is this revenge? No, Maya said. This is repair. The next week, the company froze. Rumors spread like wildfire in internal investigation. A leaked memo, the possibility of whistleblower protection being invoked. Legal scrambled to identify risks. PR panicked behind closed doors. But something new began to stir too. Custodians whispered in break rooms. Assistants met in parking garages. Old emails were forwarded, files recovered. And then 2 engineers walked out. Then 5 analysts. Then a regional director published a statement anonymously. The cracks spread fast. It was never just Maya. She was the voice that refused to stay buried. But the anger was collective. People had just needed a signal. And the elevator? It was still there. People talked about that night like a myth. No one really knew what happened in it. Only that after it, everything changed. They said 2 women went in, and only 1 walked out in power. But that wasn't true. Because power, real power, didn't belong to the board anymore. It belonged to the people who had been told to sit down and shut up for years. And who finally stood together. The headlines arrived like thunderclaps. Insider report exposes racial discrimination, fraud in major tech firm. Executive whistleblower shakes corporate power structure. From silence to spotlight, the assistant who changed everything. Maya didn't speak to the press. She didn't need to. The documents spoke for her. The screenshots, the audit trails, the internal memos with redacted names that weren't redacted quite enough. The hiring algorithm code flagged for rejecting applicants with non-Western names over 70% of the time. It was all there, and people read it because they recognized it. They had lived it too. Inside the company, chaos. Executives ducked behind HR. Managers scrambled to rewrite policies retroactively. Cassandra hadn't been seen publicly since the leak. Rumor said the board was negotiating a golden parachute exit standard procedure for someone too powerful to be fired cleanly. But Maya knew better. Cassandra wasn't gone. She was watching and waiting. Maya now walked through the halls differently. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't safe either. But she was undeniable. People nodded at her. Some smiled. Others avoided eye contact entirely, unsure if they feared her or admired her or both. She didn't care. She had a mission now. To make the changes permanent. to pull the infection out by the root. The interim CEO was brought in quietly. Raymond Ellis, a corporate cleanup expert. Polished, neutral, a stabilizer. But his first move spoke volumes. He tried to move Maya out of ethics into strategic partnerships. A fake promotion. A padded role where her visibility would be high and her power would be low. A polite exile. She refused. "I wasn't hired to decorate your diversity report," she said calmly. "I was hired to tell the truth." Alice blinked. "You're becoming a liability, Miss Brooks." "No," Maya said. "I'm your only asset right now, who still has the trust of the people who haven't quit." That night, she found her badge access revoked, her files locked, her email frozen. But Maya didn't panic. She had printed everything weeks ago. Encrypted copies, off-site backups, and all eyes. Not just among the assistants and interns, among the programmers, the analysts, the people who had once smiled at her in elevators and looked away in meetings, but who now knew what it meant to stand for something. It started with a spreadsheet. One of the junior engineers, Arjun, a quiet first-gen Indian kid who never said much in meetings, sent her a file labeled Weights and Biases. Inside, the code logs from the AI recruitment software. It was worse than she thought. Racial weighting was hard-coded. Gendered phrasing was penalized. Even certain zip codes were scored lower based on predictive churn risk, a proxy for class discrimination, dressed up in statistical language. And the kicker? The vendor was a company partially owned by Cassandra DeWitt's brother. Conflict of interest. Undisclosed. Profitable. Illegal. Maya scheduled a video call. Not with HR. Not with Ellis. With the Federal Labor Commission. And then with a journalist. Not a headline chaser, someone local. Someone who'd been covering employment rights for years and whose work had been ignored by bigger outlets. They met in a coffee shop. No cameras. No recordings. Just a notepad. Not the story, Maya said. The system is, but I can show you where the bones are buried. The next leak was surgical. The code snippets. The ownership documents. The charts showing higher rates plummeting for women and people of color after the AI was deployed. The headline didn't name Maya, but it didn't need to. Everyone inside the company knew. And the employees? They started organizing. Whispers became signatures, then meetings, then demands. A vote was called to form an employee council with real veto power on hiring, ethics, and equity practices. Ellis tried to stop it. Legal threatened. Maya didn't flinch. She published an open letter to the board, signed by over 300 employees. You can fire one voice. You can't fire all of us. That afternoon, Cassandra appeared on the executive floor, unannounced, calm, dressed in black. She walked into Maya's new office, smaller than it should be, but no longer invisible, and closed the door. "You think you've won," she said quietly. "No," Maya replied. "I think we've started." Cassandra sat. Something in her face had changed. Less arrogance. More calculation. "You've lit a match in a room full of gasoline. This place is going to burn. You know that, right?" "Good," Maya said. "Let it burn, if it means we rebuild it right." Cassandra studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled just barely. "You remind me of myself, before I learned how the game is rigged." "The game's over," Maya said. "And the rules weren't written by people like me, but I'm rewriting them anyway." Cassandra nodded slowly, almost respectfully. "Then you'd better be ready. Because when systems fall, they don't fall cleanly. They fall on people like you." But Maya didn't flinch. She had spent years watching the tower rise over her head. Now she was climbing it and dismantling it, brick by brick. And she wasn't alone. She never had been. They tried to frame her, not directly. That would have been too obvious. too crude. Instead, it came as a whisper, an anonymous tip to the compliance hotline, that Maya had accessed restricted systems, that she had manipulated files, that she was the leak, not the whistleblower, the saboteur. The investigation began in silence. She wasn't told. She noticed it in the glances, in the polite avoidance in the hallways, in the way IT suddenly disabled her two-factor authentication without explanation, and how her badge worked, but only for the doors that led nowhere. And then came the email. Subject: administrative leave pending investigation. Just like that. They underestimated her again. Maya didn't panic. She met the moment the way the system had trained her to, with documentation, with evidence, with names, dates, logs. She didn't respond to the email. She responded with a legal team. Not high-priced lawyers from the corporate elite. Civil rights attorneys, employment justice experts, digital forensics allies who had seen this playbook before. She didn't send threats. She sent affidavits. Meanwhile, something extraordinary began to happen. The employees rose. Engineers signed an open declaration supporting Maya's integrity. Designers published a digital zine titled "The Tower We Built," detailing the culture of silent cruelty that had defined their experience. Someone hung posters in the cafeteria. The problem isn't Maya. The problem is a system that can't survive the truth. And then the data team leaked an internal report Maya had never seen. It had been buried months ago. It was the real reason her project had been shut down. Her market projections? Accurate. Her warnings? Validated. But the report had been stamped high risk and hidden because it contradicted a $90 million investment plan by the executive team. They had ignored it and blamed her. The story spread. Employees stopped answering their managers' Slack messages. Surveys flooded the HR portal. A digital town hall was called, and over 600 employees logged in, most with cameras off. But their voices? Clear. One after another, they spoke. I was passed over after reporting harassment. They made me mentor new hires who got promoted before me. They said I was too urban for the client meetings. My contract was canceled when I got pregnant. And then someone said it out loud. This place was never broken. It was built this way. Maya listened from her apartment, still on forced leave, still waiting. But she didn't wait in silence. She spoke with organizers, with journalists, with people across industries. She shared what had worked, what hadn't, how to build coalitions, not cults, how to protect your records, how to watch the walls of power for their cracks. She became more than a whistleblower. She became a blueprint. Then came the call. Not from Cassandra, from the board. They wanted to meet. Not publicly. Not officially. They wanted Maya's conditions. The meeting took place in the same glass room where she'd once been silenced. But this time, the seats were full of listening eyes. And she didn't speak like an assistant begging for space. She spoke like someone carrying truth in her hands and daring them to drop it. These aren't demands, she said. These are corrections. She listed them calmly. A full third-party audit. Public reporting of diversity, pay, and promotion stats. A permanent employee-led ethics council with veto power. Reparative rehiring and compensation for wrongfully terminated staff. The right to speak at every table, without permission. One board member scoffed. This will cost us millions. Maya looked at him. You already lost billions. You just haven't noticed it yet. Because the people leaving? The people silenced? They were the company. You built your brand on their labor. Now you answer to it. Cassandra was present, silent, watching. And when the board hesitated, it was Cassandra who stood. She's right, she said quietly. And if you don't act now, you'll be responding to subpoenas instead of signatures. Silence. Then one nod. Then another. And another. The motion passed. Maya returned to work not as an assistant, not as a symbol, but as a director of institutional equity with full authority, full transparency, and full autonomy. And even then, she didn't claim it as victory, because it wasn't just about her. It was about them, the ones who had whispered, who had endured, who had quit without fanfare, who had cried in stairwells, who had trained their bosses, who had sat through the jokes, who had kept the receipts. Maya walked through the building weeks later and saw it differently. Not fixed, not redeemed, but cracked open. And in those cracks, light, real light, the kind people build with, together. 6 months later, the elevator still creaked. Same box, same fluorescent buzz, same brushed metal panels that reflected everyone's face like a ghost. Maya stepped in alone, floor 3 to floor 29. But this time, she wasn't just passing through. She was going up with purpose, with clarity, with people behind her. A voice interrupted her thoughts. Hold the door? She reached out instinctively and caught it. A young woman stepped in early 20s, crisp blue badge clipped to her bag, wide eyes scanning the buttons like they were in a foreign language. Maya smiled gently. First week? The woman nodded. First day? They stood side by side. The doors closed. For a long beat silence. Then, "You're her, aren't you?" the young woman asked, almost afraid to name it. Maya didn't flinch. "I guess I am." The woman looked down. Then back up. "Thank you." Maya turned slightly. "For what?" "For not leaving when you had every reason to." The elevator rose. Floor by floor. The pause between levels felt slower now. Not heavy. Intentional. The building wasn't perfect. Maya would never pretend it was. There were still the managers who rolled their eyes behind closed doors. The legal advisors who whispered about liability optics. The board members who approved reforms, but dragged their feet when money was involved. But they didn't have the last word anymore, because employees now had access to reporting systems with teeth, because interns now had mentors who looked like them and saw them, because salary data was now public, transparent, tracked, and most importantly, because no one could be silenced with a smile and a policy memo again. The new hiring algorithm? Built with oversight, reviewed monthly by the Ethics Council, designed with equity at the core, not as an afterthought, but as a foundation. One line of code had been placed at the top of the script, like a quiet rebellion. Simple, brutal, honest. Cassandra? She stepped down quietly 3 months after the investigation concluded. She gave no interviews, no memoir. She disappeared into a world that protected its own wealthy, untouched, forgettable. But Maya carried something of her, not her legacy, but her warning. When systems fall, they fall on people like you. That was true. But Maya had built scaffolding, not for herself, for the people who would come after her. One of them, Jamila, a former contractor turned data specialist, spoke at the first employee assembly. She stood on a stage Maya had fought to build and said, "You taught us that we don't have to beg for access to broken tables. We can build our own and make sure everyone gets a seat." And the room stood and applauded. And for the first time, Maya let herself feel it not triumph, but vindication, the slow-burning kind that doesn't shout, just stands there, unshaken. Outside, the company's reputation shifted, not sanitized, but respected, because the world didn't need another brand pretending to care. It needed one that had been called out and listened, one that was held accountable and changed. And because Maya insisted every presentation start with 3 slides, who we excluded, what it cost us, what we're doing about it. Some investors called it overkill. Some called it brave. But Maya didn't care what they called it, because names don't build justice. People do. One night, months later, Maya stayed late. Not because she had to. Because she chose to. She walked the halls alone, checking posters on corkboards, reading notes people had left in the shared spaces. One caught her eye, scrawled in thick pen, under the Employee Bill of Rights. Because of Maya, I didn't quit. I stayed. And I fought. And I finally got promoted. No signature. No glory. Just truth. Left in the open. She took the elevator down. The same elevator. Same flicker overhead. Same hum. Same metal silence. But she wasn't trapped anymore. She had reclaimed it. And maybe, somewhere in the future, someone else would step into that same steel box, trembling, doubting, quiet. And maybe they'd remember that even in silence, even when the doors close, even when power seems immovable, truth fits in a folder. Courage fits in one voice. And change fits anywhere, even in an elevator